events and the upcoming events in July hosted by Blizzard. We're trying to extract some infos of the guys, trying to get some more infos here. And then at the end, we're going to go into some chat questions. So if you guys have something that comes up during the stream, make sure to
thank you, sir.
Write it down. And then at the end, we can get into that. And yeah, to be able to cover all of these topics, I invited my Maxroll friends to join me. So maybe we could get a brief introduction. Maybe we go Mag, Rex, and Woody.
Hi, everybody. If you don't know who I am, my name is MacroBioBoy. I'm this douchey-looking dude right over here. I used to have red hair. It made a lot more sense back then. I play the Necromancer. That's all I do. I just sit in Kyovashad training room just hitting it and going, why isn't this doing anything? And then I make videos about it.
My name's Drax. I wear a blue hoodie, play video games, play all the classes.
Yes, I'm Woody. I play a lot of Diablo and other RPGs. And I'm, well, making sure that Maxroll Diablo section is up to date and working fine. So that's what I do.
Great, thank you guys. I'm Chronix. I'm also working on the Maxroll build guides for Necromancer, just like Macro. And let's actually start with the first topic. We got the introduction of a lot of new and very powerful uniques with interesting effects. What is everyone's thoughts after getting to play around with them? Did this live up to your expectation? Have they exceeded what you thought, how powerful they are going to be? Maybe Mac, if you could start us out with this first one right here, and then everyone chimes in as they see fit.
Yeah, so it's a little bit hard to like get a full scope of what we're dealing with because the changes to the unique items as we've known it, the majority of them didn't make it into the Season 5 PTR. We won't see them until Season 5. So, Fists of Fate still do whatever the hell they do, and Bloodless Scream is still absolutely useless. That being said, they introduced so many new unique items, and I think where I'm not somebody who really likes to ascribe things to like power creep because that only really exists in a competitive meta where things are no longer viable once a new thing is added. Nope. These unique items are insane. Like they need to get cut in half or removed from the game as far as I'm concerned, but they're like insanely powerful. All of them quadruple your damage. There's no downsides, just great stats. And it kind of goes directly against the ideology that Jackson said on the most recent Campfire stream, which was like, we don't just want uniques to be generically good and used on every build. And I think basically every build is going to use Lucian's Helm, Lochran's Amulet, Tybalt's Will, and probably Varathiel as a basic skill if you're doing that. And if not, Starless Skies. So I don't know where the disconnect happened, but that's what I experienced in the PTR.
Yeah, feel free to chime in, guys. Yeah.
Yeah, so I pretty much agree with Macro. One thing that was difficult for me on the PTR is you log in and then, like Macro said, everyone says that everything is so overpowered and some things are borderline bugged and people are hitting for trillions and quadrillions of damage. So it's because there wasn't an update live on the PTR to correct some of these things. I pretty much just stayed away from using it because what am I going to learn? Just test the bugged mechanic again. One thing that kind of surprised me, one of the things was what Macro mentioned about how they're getting away from just generic uniques that just increase your damage. But they said in their blog that they want people to use like up to 4 uniques per build. That number seems, I don't know how you guys feel about it, but that number seems very high to me. Like maybe 4 uniques if you also count farming for uber uniques, like that might make more sense, but I personally was just straight up shocked when they said that, and I wonder if is that like the real direction they're going in? That's that number seems very high to me.
Yeah, I kind of agree also with some of the points, especially what Rax just mentioned about the number of uniques. Personally, I really enjoyed Season 4, partly because we didn't have many uniques that were actually good. I mean, okay, I don't mind that uniques are good, but I mind that we've like in Season 2 or so where every build had like tons of uniques in there. Everything was like so homogenized.
What up, Grim?
Everything was the same, I feel. And it was way better now in Season 4 where items dropped and you were excited about them and you could like alter them and temper them, and it just feels way more interesting. I think 4 is definitely maybe the extreme end that I find acceptable. Yeah, if it's like more like 1 or 2, that would be way better. But yeah, it's also like, as Macro said, it's like, it's nice to introduce a lot of uniques. It's nice that there are many choices, but I don't want like so many generics. I want, you know, build specific ones, maybe like build defining in a way where I can play on an alternative version of a build thanks to a certain unique. You know, I want there to be like 2 chain lightning builds, right? I don't want, you know, like some people say, for example, the new chain lightning pants, you know, they don't work with the aspect for chain lightning and there's no synergy. But I think that is actually a good thing. You know, like I want to have an axial conduit chain lightning build and I want to have a non-axial conduit chain lightning build. You know, that I think this could actually like really enlarge the build diversity and make it more interesting. But with like how everything was working on PTR, yeah, it was like too wacky, too buggy, really hard to really, you know, get much information out of it, because you don't know what's actually going to happen to either the new uniques that half of them are just broken or bugged or both, and then all the old uniques that they will probably change in pretty significant ways. And some of them have to be like changed fundamentally to even be considered in the future. So just the stat buff won't really do it for many of them.
I have to fully agree here, especially the build defining part about it. I remember back in the days when, for example, for druids, you had to find your Tempest Drawer just to be able to play the build that you really wanted to be playing from the get-go. And that kind of felt really awkward for the first 80 levels or so, until you were able to find that Tempest Drawer, and then you suddenly were playing the build that you wanted to play in the first place. I think that's something that we need to, I would love if we could move away from that. And then, yeah, basically uniques giving you a choice of, do I take my build this way or that way, depending on which unique you're actually using. I actually really like that point by Woody a lot. And Macro, you said earlier about the downside. I think the only real thing is the Crown of Lucion that kind of brought a downside with it. And I would actually really like if when we're doing 2 to 4 uniques, we actually don't just slap them on there and call it a day, but we actually have to think about how many downsides can my build really take and how many can I work around with so that I can actually unlock the power that they bring. I think it's very important to have a downside like Crown of Lucion on quite a lot more items. I think stuff like Starless Skies, for example, is just powerful, right? I think, okay, it's fine. It's a mythic unique, but the uniques that are Shard of Varathiel, for example, are just a set item when you want to play the basic attack build and you don't have to think, do I really want this? It's just an auto include in a build. And that's kind of a little bit what I have a problem with now with the current state at the moment.
That's exactly, I mean, I unironically have a lot of issues with the direction the uniques look like they're taking. I do think that if we all agree on that, we're probably in the minority. I think most people want to find a cool unique item, put it on, and feel super powerful, and are not necessarily interested in the puzzle of, oh, because I put this on, this means I have to do this with my pants and this and that. They do just want to find the cool stuff, put it on, and be strong. I just find that incredibly boring, and I don't think that's ultimately healthy for the game's longevity and itemization's longevity. Like, Season 4 was all about, like, we're going to fully revamp items, we're going to be making decisions, and as you get more power, you get to min-max in these ways. Oh, because I got a G8 crit chance here, that allows me to actually put attack speed on this piece of gear, and now builds are outputting insane damage in the late game. I think that's kind of, like, perfect. And if all the unique items are all just very powerful and good, and if you want to do that thing, you put them on, that's just a set item. It's just not green. Like, if Helm of Lucian, Starless Skies, Lochran, Zamiel, and Varathiel are used on every single basic skill build, that's just a set of unique items. And then the other aspects that you can fit in are always going to be Moonrise and adaptability, and then whatever your damage multiplier on your gloves is. So then just call it a set. But we don't want that. So why are we, like, parading them around like that? I don't, like, the Shard of Varathiel and Lochran's Amulet have the same stats on them. They have all stats, maximum essence, attack speed, and then a minor damage boost, and then their unique ability that says double or triple your damage. how did we get to that point? Like, how did we get to that item existing in that way? I'm very confused by it.
I think I can explain. I have an idea at least how we got there. And this is that everyone is complaining, uniques, they have bad stats. I want, useful stats on my items. And then the devs think about, what can we put on these items that are useful for everyone? And well, it turns out there's not many things that you can put there that is actually useful for everyone, right? And then, they put all stats, they put, resource or whatever, and there you go. And this is what you get. And there's attack speed and crit maybe, right? That's like the universal stats that kind of work. Maybe you can throw in like a life or something, but then people are going to complain, I have life on my weapon, I don't want that, or something. They basically just followed what everyone was crying about all the time, right? Like personally, I'm someone who's like, I really like these weird random stats that some items have on their unique slots, because it kind of like gives these builds a bit of a flavor, a bit of like a different feel. Like just the fact that 100,000 steps, let's just imagine that this item would ever be used by anyone, but just the fact that it has dexterity on a Barb build, I don't know, it's like so thematically fitting with the item. I just enjoy having the dexterity on the item. It's just that, the devs have to remember that dexterity doesn't actually do anything for a Barb, but, maybe give you like an extra Paragon, node or something like that, right? And outside of that, it has like basically no benefit. So the item's power budget needs to be adjusted accordingly, and another stat has to compensate for the lack of a good stat that is just flavor, basically. Like, it's the same thing as people were complaining about attack speed on the Whirlwind Glove, for example. I really liked having attack speed on the Whirlwind Glove, despite attack speed not working for Whirlwind until recently, because it was actually, something that you would never voluntarily put on your build, but it feels good to have more attack speed. It makes you jump faster, it makes you steal grasp faster, and so on. And people are just all about, oh man, I want a good damage stat there, without really considering the fun factor of actually having attack speed that just makes a build feel better, right? So I personally really loved the old design of random stats that are more flavorful and not universally good. You just need to make sure that the item overall, the item's power budget overall is good enough. And this was really like the big miss that the devs did there, I think, in the past, with like, okay, yeah, we put attack speed on the Whirlwind Gloves. That is like one of the 4 stats, and now we put 3 more stats that all have the same value, right? And they didn't really consider the fact that attack speed did actually nothing, really nothing, right? So that's kind of the problem, I think. That's how we arrived at this moment.
Yeah, I think another piece of the puzzle is, it looks like sometimes it doesn't happen every time, but when Blizzard has an issue, so let's say Chain Lightning. So they're looking at Chain Lightning Sorcerer and they say, all right, this is not meeting our expectations and people want to play Chain Lightning. It's kind of like what Chronix said earlier. Then what they'll do is they'll say, okay, well, I've got a big fix for it. We're going to introduce Axial Conduit. But Axial Conduit, kind of like what Woody said earlier, it doesn't really give you a choice. There's not really a way to play Chain Lightning any other way. You just put on Axial Conduit, but then you also have to find it, which is very far into a lot of people's journeys. And then when you're playing like vanilla Chain Lightning, like if you're really excited to play it next season, when they're trying to buff some of these builds, when they put a lot of their eggs in one basket in the one singular unique that completely transforms it, you don't get the different ways to play it that Woody was asking for, and it takes forever for it to come online, as Chronix said. So I think another part of one of these base problems is when Blizzard is trying to build these new archetypes, when they say, oh, let's just throw everything into this one unique, then you're very pigeonholed into it and it doesn't feel good until you eventually get it. And then if you wait that long to get it and it doesn't completely change your build, then people will complain and say that it feels bad. So then how exactly do you fix that? It's not such an easy thing to solve, especially because of the way that imprinting works, in that, okay, if Axial Conduit goes on pants, I could just move my other 2 important defensive powers somewhere else, and I'm not really that penalized. So I don't exactly like the approach that they're taking to solve some of these issues, but I also recognize it's probably not as easy to solve as one might think to make all these things work.
Yeah, and go ahead, Meg, please.
I wanted to preface by saying, whenever we are, because a lot of this is critique, right? None of these are easy to solve issues. But what we're doing is we're experiencing the symptoms of the attempts at solving them and giving feedback on them. Here's one of my biggest problems is that I don't, because they also do this with aspects. Let's take, for example, the Bloodlance skill. Anybody who's ever played Bloodlance knows that Bloodlance feels like trash. It was unusable for 3 seasons. They finally gave it enough aspects to work. Great. Now you want to give me new unique items that are very powerful. Cool. Where do I fit the aspects that fixed the skills that weren't working? And where do I fit the cool new aspects that you're also giving me? I don't have room for any aspects on my build, especially if I'm supposed to use 4 unique items. So I don't know. I mean, there's an expansion coming. The expansion is where I think it happens, but I do not like the approach of let's fix the issues with skills or the lack of power with skills or a clunkiness in skills with unique items and aspects instead of fixing the skill. And the more cool toys you give me that don't fix my skill, I can't use. I have to use Gore Quills on Bloodlance. I can't not use it. There's no other way around it. That means one of my pieces of gear is always going to be that. You can't give me a cool unique pair of gloves. You can't give me a cool new unique amulet. You can't give me an aspect that gives me mobility. I can't fit that. And they just keep adding more aspects and unique items, and I legitimately don't know how I'm supposed to equip them to my character if it's meant to fix my character. Because I made an Exodia Necromancer. I put a unique item on every single gear piece in Season 3 on Sever. It did great because Sever was trash. But if I put together enough automated skills, at least Corpse Explosion would do some damage for me. And that sucks. Like, that is a bad gameplay experience as far as I'm concerned. People were stoked about it because they could finally equip all the stuff that they had. But that's not a build. I didn't make that build. I just put on 9 pieces of gold gear and then went out and attacked stuff. And I think we're going to run into that issue with Season 5 as well, because it's like, I couldn't fit on a lot of the new aspects because I don't have enough room for them because they're not big enough multipliers or they're not the aspect that fixes my build. And these unique items kind of fall into that same bucket of how do I put them on?
Just to add one little thing to what Macro said. So I had this fun thing where I went a few days and I just let chat vote on just what's the shittiest build right now? Like just what doesn't work at all. And when I went to Shred Druid and I took a closer look at it, like Macro said, I didn't even get to the aspects of the uniques. So I'm looking at Shred, you take the base Shred, you take the upgrade, and then I'm looking at the 2 choices for the enhancement or whatever, the only choice you actually get to make. And one of them gives Shred the dash, which essentially enables the entire build, makes it fun, like makes everything work about Shred. And the other one was like, it does poison damage or something, which does have its use. But it's like, I'm sitting there, I'm like, if I'm not standing still fighting an Uber boss, when will I ever not pick this? You haven't even given me a choice. How are these dashes not just built into Shred? And then you can actually give me 2 viable choices that actually make Shred interesting and make different builds. It's things like that don't make sense. And like Macro said, I don't want you to solve it by giving me an aspect that I have to take that solves it. You have to make the base skill work very nicely. And that's when you can enable yourself to make some interesting choices later on.
Yeah, I think the Great Feast on the Necromancer is something where it dawned on me that this is just a crazy problem going forward. Yeah, I see all these multipliers being added or general multipliers being added to my class, and I'm like, great. Now I can actually try and make Bone Spear a little bit stronger and it catching up to the other stuff. I can make Blood Surge and Bloodlust catch up to the other stuff. But if I want to play Great Feast, which is actually fine because it also has a downside you need to solve, which is kind of like a cool mechanic, and I really like that. But you gotta substitute another offensive aspect, and what did you gain then? Maybe 15% more multiplier than the other thing before? So you're looking at it and you see 45% multiplier, and you go like, wow, that's actually quite a lot. But what do you actually have to sacrifice to even get to the point of using it, right? Like, look at Edge Masters. Big downside, 20% multi. Yeah, if you are lucky. And imagine your build was using Edgemasters. So now what did you get? You effectively didn't get a 45% multi. You just got a little bit more now, but
So
that's always
Yeah,
going to be the
Elfgang.
problem. And at some point,
Thank
we're going
you.
to be sitting there with aspects that
You
do
subscribe to a bad
60%, and then
content
you,
creator.
well, there you go. Now you're not using Great Feast anymore.
we're a
So
real
I
one.
also don't see a big,
Whoop whoop.
I don't know how to solve this issue of trying
Thank you,
to
Elfgang.
get the builds to catch up to each other with just throwing aspects that have more multipliers on them. I'm not sure how to fix that issue at all with the current system we have.
I think it's like mostly a problem of this the way different builds scale. I actually discussed this earlier on my stream, and I made a little graph in Paint. I did a little Rax impersonation there.
Paint is great.
So I was like kind of like showing how different classes like generally scale. I mean, of course, you could make a graph for every single build, but like certain classes have like certain breakpoints where they get a lot of power spike, and then they have like better or worse scaling in the late game because of certain multipliers that it can stack up. One example in season 4 would be like Thunderstruck node, right, for druids. Really powerful multiplier. You can get up to like triple damage or so when you stack enough distant damage, for example, in your storm build. And well, you have to first of all get to that point where that you can temper the distant damage and get the right tempers, and then masterwork them and so on, right? So there's like a kind of like a scaling progression curve there on some builds that is not present on other builds, and so they all kind of like end up in different places at the end, even though they might start at like somewhat reasonable values at level 10, right? If you're like level 10 or level 20, you have no aspects, you could actually even kind of see a semblance of balance in the game, right? Where okay, like in a very simplistic, Diablo 4, like, open beta Diablo 4, basically, right, from last year, like stuff actually didn't feel like there was like this omega crazy stuff, and then there was like this super like unusable build. But now that there are so many tools then to scale them later on that is only available to certain builds but not available to other builds, there's just like such a mismatch, right? And this is exactly what we talked about with the aspects. You can't just throw in another aspect and give like a bigger number, and then you can like, at some point another build will fall behind, and then you throw an even bigger aspect for that build, and then at some point you're going to have like 60% multiplier, 80% multiplier, 100%, 200%, whatever, right? It just keeps going up, because if you just fix it through aspects, you don't fix the core issue, which is
Manuel, thank
the
you very much for
scaling
the
of
super
different
chat.
builds is different.
I
And you have to
appreciate
give
you.
them like kind of like a
Thank you, thank you.
similar power level with all of the multipliers considered. But I don't think this is really happening currently, right? They are fine at like level 20,
And thank you for the
and
follow.
then everyone gets access to different things, and those different things, and you eventually don't match up to the same number anymore. And this is really the problem, I think. And you can't just throw in aspects to fix it.
To get back, like to get a little bit back onto the topic of new uniques. Now that you say this, Woody, with the scalers, is it possible to have uniques that bring these additional scalers like Thunderstruck and damage to distant on items? Is that something that makes them a unique and then they don't even have any other effect? Is that something that
I
could
think
be
that
an
is
idea going forward?
that is absolutely something that I should be exploring. In fact, there's actually some feedback that I've been giving, and I will give more of it. Like there are uniques, for example, like Word of Hakan, that completely enable a Vein of Arrows build, right? And if you want to play Word of Hakan, if you want to play Vein of Arrows, you play Word of Hakan. Or like now, for example, we have a unique for Iron Maelstrom, one of the new items, the Unbroken Chain, I think it's called, or something. That is like the enabler of an Iron Maelstrom build, but not really, because it doesn't actually add anything to Iron Maelstrom besides giving it a bit of shorter cooldown. So it's a meme, right? You can maybe play it in Helltide if you want. I've tried it on a PTR, and that's about it, because it does like not even 1 million damage if you try. So that's kind of like the problem with some of these items. And I think adding something like a scaling mechanism to a unique item is a really good idea to enable these kind of builds. Uniques being interesting and build enabling and build transforming is all good. This is exactly what I would expect from a unique, and this will definitely be one thing to explore here for the future as well for the devs.
What if I agree that they should never be build enabling and that they should only ever be build transforming? Else we're all running around with Tempest Roar dreams.
But I'm not talking about Tempest Roar. Tempest Roar is, well, it's somewhat generic item, I guess, when you're talking about the druid space. But like Vein of Arrows is just not a build until you have Word of Hakan, and then it's kind of a build, right? And I think it's totally fine that there are some late game items that you can look forward to and like grind them out and then get the combo online and then you switch your build, and that's okay. It's the same as Axial Conduit. If there was a scenario where you can play Chain Lightning with just the aspects, and then you can also play another Chain Lightning build once you have the Axial Conduit, and it's a completely different build, and it's like 2 separate Chain Lightning variants that both are viable but feel very different. I think this is optimal. I think this is actually what it should be. This is perfect.
So we agree. Hakan is failing, and Axial Conduit in your theoretical would be the perfect thing. Again, transformative as opposed to enabling.
No, I like both. Like technically, the Chain Lightning, you can play Chain Lightning from level 1, but you cannot play the way you play Axial Conduit Chain Lightning from level 1, right? You need the item, and this is like a new build. It's just called Chain Lightning anyway because it's the same skill. But really, it's an Axial Conduit build. Like if you can just make a new skill called Axial Conduit if you want, and this is the build. So it's just a terminology thing, I believe. It's a different build.
Okay.
I don't think kind of to agree with what
and
you
I'm not
said.
sure these guys get that. We have not talked about a single uber
the
unique
same
MC chase.
ideology.
We're talking about
all
regular
the time.
unique items right now.
They can sometimes have it be, build defining. It's a chase item. You get it, and it enables on a godly build. That's fine. And then sometimes you have different variants. I'm not going to be super upset if Blizzard doesn't mix and match them. But just going the one way, you must get this unique. Otherwise, this build completely sucks. That doesn't make the game fun at all. And to Macro's point, I'm way more excited when I pick up a unique item or they introduce a unique item that changes the way that I play. Axial Conduit now does a bouncing explosion and it gives me a lot more damage when it's circling around me. Okay, now you've made it more interesting for me. And then the one Fractured Winterglass last season, you throw a frozen orb, it spawns your conjurations with which throw frozen orbs. That's a much better way for me to increase damage and have fun rather than saying a skill does 100% more damage.
Yeah, I fully agree with the chaos. Go ahead, Woody.
I want to jump in there again.
Sure.
So yeah, I agree. Like this is really good what I've done with, for example, Fractured Winterglass to make Frozen Orb itself more fun. But personally, like to kind of get back to what we were discussing earlier, I would also love if there was a non-conjuration way of playing Frozen Orb that is viable, right? If there was a non-Fractured Winterglass way of playing Frozen Orb. So you have like the conjuration stuff, and it feels amazing to throw like 2,000 Frozen Orbs around everywhere. But it's kind of like some of these items getting to the point where they're so powerful that, even though a core skill exists that is called Frozen Orb that you can choose at level 1, you would never really dream about playing Frozen Orb at level 1 when you can just play a better leveling build, wait for the Fractured Winterglass, and then play Frozen Orb, right? It's like Frozen Orb just ceased to exist until you get that item, basically, because the power gap between having it and not having it is so large from one single piece of gear. So I think that's also problematic with what they're doing there. Like, some of these uniques, yeah, they transform the build and make it cool, but on the other hand, it's kind of like the build doesn't even exist anymore without the unique anymore. Like, no one would really do that, right? So it's like, yeah, kind of problematic as well, having so much power in a single item.
So in theory, the uniques should be theme changing or theme defining instead of just giving you 100% more damage and making that the only way to activate the build fully. Like, exactly like Woody just said with Frozen Orb, doing the Conjuration way or the normal Frozen Orb way. But we then would need a counterpart to the Fractured Winterglass to also give you the non-Conjuration way of playing Frozen Orb, right? Like the counterpart to that one. And then maybe bring their power levels close to each other so that you really have a choice and you don't have a very obvious choice to make because it just deals way more damage, right? So you're actually choosing the theme you want to play by equipping the corresponding unique. That's something that would make sense then going on in the going into the future.
Yeah, I mean, I guess long term, this is probably where we're headed anyway. Where at some point, it seems like they're not really like making a lot of new skills, for example, or anything like that, right? They are like just trying to change the way that certain skills work through aspects, for uniques, and if they want to further increase the build diversity in the game, it's already pretty high, I guess. like not everything is viable necessarily, but technically can play a lot of different builds, right? That feel different, that look different, and so on. That you like build around. And if they really want to like expand the options even further, at some point we have to get to the point where we have 2 or 3 Frozen Orb builds and 2 or 3 Chain Lightning builds and 2 or 3 whatever builds, right? Because this is really the only way to go further at some point if they don't want to like expand the skill tree themselves.
Yeah, like so if I was at Blitz, so we're talking about a lot of different things like the scaling, the power creep, how uniques fit in, this and that. If I were Blizzard, so they spent a lot of this last year fixing a lot of things, right? And I don't know if the word fix is the right word here, but I think a great starting point would be for the team to sit down with the current state of the game or the current state of the game at the launch of the expansion and just look at the skills in the skill tree. Forget the legendary powers, forget the uniques, forget the Paragon board, forget everything. And it's things like one of your upgrade options for Shred is the dash. So if all of us made a Shred build today, it would be, we would all take
Skill
that
tags
upgrade.
are underused,
So then
they're
is
exploring
no
more,
choice.
I would say.
The skill tree is already so simplistic in the one little choice that we have to make. If it's not a choice, what do we really have here? And then, like Woody said, you will never balance everything perfectly. That's super unrealistic. I would never expect you to do that.
Yep.
But I think we have enough data right now to understand that if you level as Firewall, it will obliterate you leveling as Frozen Orb until you get the right stuff. So it's just like, I think some of these things at their base need to be looked at first, and then you can look at all the stuff more in detail about how you build upon it. If you keep changing everything at the end game, but you don't make the changes to the base stuff early, I think it's going to be way harder to fix as time goes on.
I also think that they'll run into an issue inevitably, and hopefully we're all just kind of willing to suffer through this thing, because it's really not a bad thing. The Shard of Varathiel exists. It says multiply your basic damage by 4. That's what it says. It's an item, you put it on, you do 4 times basic skill damage. Pretty good. That means that any changes that they would make to basic skills to make them stronger or more viable, because the player base asked for basic skill builds, they said we're happy to oblige. I don't know if you all have looked at my class recently. There's one basic skill that does damage, and it's actually only through Bone Spirit, so that's funny. It's not, I'm being as sarcastic as possible. But the Shard of Varathiel exists. So if they want to double the damage from any of my skills, now they're like, well, hold on, it's going to be 4 times stronger in the end game. I would rather them go, we have fixed these things to all be viable within their own use cases. The early game loves that. We get to enjoy it. Oh no, this build ends up being really strong this season. It's the S tier build. And then the next season we balance that. And that's okay. It can be the outlier for a little bit. I'm 100% on board with the concept of, hey, let's go take all the stuff that we've learned by adding these aspects and unique items, go make all the skills just strictly better. And then we can scale down the stuff in the end game so it stays relative. And it's okay that we have a season where, finally I get to cast Bloodlance and it's cool. Or I finally get to use my basic skill builder and it's cool. Or whatever. I finally get to have my dash on Shred. Because they don't want to piss anybody off by nerfing stuff mid-season. I'm fine with that. Let it all be a little bit too strong by fixing that core part and then bring it back in line. I don't want them to ever be stymied in making things better because there's so much scaling in the end game that they don't want to blow it out of proportion. That's my only fear, is that they're like, we can't really like tear this band-aid off now because we added too much stuff to the end game and now it will be too strong.
Yeah, I think this way of going hard into one direction and then scaling back should be something that should be explored during the PTR. And maybe this is exactly what happened with the Shard, with the Crown. They're just like, you know what, just slap a number on there and we'll see how it goes. And then we can, before the Season 5 really goes live, we can then have something that is the real version of the Crown of Lucion, for example, or the Shard of Varathiel, right? Going hard into one direction with the PTR, seeing crazy builds coming out of it and doing crazy stuff, and then actually scaling it back for the real release. I think that's maybe the philosophy going forward when it comes to that. I just hope I'm right, because I don't see myself not equipping Crown of Lucion and the talisman with the current version of it. Like, if that goes live onto the realm, onto the real season release, I'm having trouble actually making builds without them, I guess. So maybe leaning very hard into the power fantasy and then dialing it back on the PTR is something that we just have to get used to. Although I can't really remember if that was the case on season 4. I think aspects weren't really the focus or uniques, but tempers have been changed in power as well, going from season 4 PTR to live, right?
Well, in general, the power was tuned down, I guess. You know, we remember like the twister bars, for example, the entire screen full of twisters that just one-shot everything and these kind of things. Pit 200 was Omega easy, and now it's like unachievable and so on, right? So it was kind of like the opposite there, where like compared to now, basically,
Daylon,
right? Like
thank you very much for the follow.
everyone, like every build was able to do Pit 200, and that was obviously a problem as well. And I think it's kind of like a mistake to like make stuff too powerful on the PTR and then dial that back later, because then you have people like making all these videos about the PTR, and then people are going to be upset. Oh, they got nerfed. Of course, you know, fun police and so on, right? I think it's way better to just like, you know, bring in an item, be a bit cautious if you don't know exactly how it's going to interact with the rest of the game and how people are going to use it. You know, some of these uniques can be used very universally. Some uniques are like very, you know, strictly confined to like a certain build or something. But, you know, if you as a developer, if you're not sure how good will it really be, I would rather just err on the side of making it too weak, even on the PTR, and then just improve it later, because else you're going to just set the wrong expectations, right? Everyone's going to think that we're going to go into season 5 and there are no buff nerfs, or there are, you know, these insane items like Locrans and Lucions and stuff like that, like, I don't know, from my perspective, obviously have to get nerfed. But a lot of people don't think so, right? A lot of people think they will not get nerfed, and maybe they will not. Who knows, right? Maybe Blizzard is just like, okay, let's just throw everything in there. We buff everything to the moon last season before the expansion, and then, you know, the big crash in season 6 or something. Who knows? But it's just, yeah, like a lot of people are complaining also about, you know, how we are forced to use like only those 5 uniques and nothing else is really remotely good. Even post unique rebalance, you know, patch, right? They want to like balance every unique and make it better. Even if I imagine the wildest outcomes, I cannot imagine a scenario where I would not wear all these new unique items, right? So it's just kind of problematic with how they initially balance them, either not thinking about how they would work, or maybe misinterpreting their own design, or maybe bugging them out in a way that they didn't think about, that we actually understood and learned and then used it to our advantage. So I think it's also kind of like, yeah, just setting the wrong expectations, I think, when you have a PTR like that.
So yeah, to add something here. So first thing is, Woody said, don't go too strong on the PTR, because then when you nerf it, everyone gets mad. We've seen this. This is empirical evidence. We've seen it a million times in Diablo 3. Anything that started too strong on the PTR, that got dialed down for the launch, it royally pissed off. It didn't matter why. It didn't matter if it deserved it. It royally pissed everybody off without exception. So that's definitely the strategy. So I would have some feedback for Blizzard that I'm wondering what your guys' take on this. But I think before I give it, I have to put out some caveats here. So first of all, I'm so glad that they did the PTR. It's a million times better than not doing it. Like let us test it. And there's and I understand that they just changed the entire game. I'm sure that they're, you know, strapped for resources and trying to get these seasons out on 3-month cycles. I'm not saying what they're doing is easy.
My volume is
But
significantly lower.
There's a famous saying, which I really just don't agree with. And the famous saying is, any publicity is good publicity. I could give a lot of examples where it's just not true. I think in some ways, this, with some of the things that happen in the PTR here, it actually hurt Blizzard's reputation a little bit. So what we hear all the time is, Blizzard has no idea what they're doing. They have no idea how to balance anything. They have no idea how their systems work. They have no idea how to make an end game. You know, we've heard the Diablo 4 bad memes for a long time. But the state that some of the things released in were actually just pretty puzzling to me. And actually, compared to the sentiment that I felt from some of the community, I actually was a little more forgiving, I think, than other people. But descending into hell and we stand in a red room. Open up these chests. You can barely even get enough. It's almost impossible to get enough whatever they're called, Aether, to open up the 250 chests unless you play the higher ones. Okay, they do really exciting things later, the butcher spawns or whatever, but nothing happens in the regular one, which is what most people are going to play. It's impossible to like level it up until they emergency hot fixed it. There's just so many things that seemed like grotesquely off that I think it was a bad look for Blizzard. I'm wondering, did you guys feel the same way? Because I was sitting there at some point and I was like, I'm so glad they did the PTR. I'm glad to give feedback. I don't want to give Blizzard the impression that they shouldn't do the PTR, but some of this seems like it was barely tested. It was like thrown out there saying, let's let everybody try it, whatever, and then we'll fix it. Well, if that was your strategy, I think it actually did some damage there.
I kind of agree with that. And I think the fact that we don't even get like real patches on a PTR, like at least in Diablo 3, we used to have 2 weeks PTRs, and there would usually be a patch in the middle where, you know, at least the most egregious, like, you know, bugs and whatever, like broken stuff would be addressed, or maybe even like a redesign of a set would happen, you know, that they tried like a certain design, it didn't work out. People pointed out the problems, and then a week later we'd actually get an update to that, and we would see it and test it and, you know, see what it's like. And most of the time that it worked much better, right? Here we have a 1 week PTR, no updates outside of like this one hotfix that was kind of like a novelty that made the new system even tryable, and that's it, right? I think it's okay if they had like a 2 or 3 weeks PTR and then they do like 2 or 3 patches and they say, okay, we're gonna throw it on there like untested, you know, find everything. We're gonna do our best, you know, overtime this week, you know, fix everything the best we can, throw out the patch a week later, and then, you know, we're already like 90% of the way there to the final release or something, where everything is kind of like in shape. But yeah, right now it's like, okay, we had the PTR. I have no idea how the unique items are going to look. I have no idea how the unique items that they introduced are going to work, because half of them are bugged to hell. I have no idea how the new system is going to work, because everyone hates it. The rewards are horrible. You know, everything, it feels off about it. And it's basically like it will go live and it's like untested completely, because for this to even be remotely good, they have to rework the entire thing, right? And this is really a problem. No one will have any clue how good it will be. And Blizzard will also have no clue, because they will not get a second round of feedback on it. So it's just everyone loses, I think. And it's just kind of like a really weird way of handling the entire situation.
I feel like I think I'm with you, Rax, where it's like, I'm very willing to be forgiving, but it's only because I've worked as effectively a product owner. I've had end users for a software application that I had to troubleshoot in real time while people are like getting stopped at the pharmacy, not able to get their drugs because like bugs are happening. I feel very deeply for developers. The PTR should be buggy because we should be testing stuff, but it should be niche bugs. It should be, oh, nobody thought to put these 4 things together. It shouldn't be I put on the item and it doesn't work. Like, it shouldn't be I put on the item and it doesn't do what it says on the item. And again, I can't stress this enough. I feel so bad for the developers. We desperately need the PTR because we are suffering at the hands of these bugs when it goes live in the seasons prior. But now we get the PTR and the casual player base goes to log on and the stuff doesn't work, and they treat it as if it's actively impacting the game they're currently playing. They go, this is the same game. I'm playing this game and it's broken, and now that makes me feel bad, and now I can't be hyped. This is supposed to make it so that Season 5 is better. But the state that we get things in when it's first introduced always experiences, like, I think, an above average amount of hurdles. There are above average amount of issues. There are above average amount of bugs. And there's no way to rectify that without just bringing that number down. It's gotta be, oh, if you equip these 3 things, then the black hole opens in each character. Not, I click the skill and it doesn't do anything. Like, it can't be that, which happens too often. And I'm the one who's trying to stop people from being hyperbolic, trying to stop people from over exaggerating. I like put on the Shade Mist aspect. It has 100% lucky hit chance to trigger all of your skill lucky hit chance on your minions. It shouldn't have any lucky hit chance. This has happened every single season they've ever added anything that does damage in a unique way. They learned, so it doesn't trigger your skills anymore. It just triggers everything on your gear. Where's that disconnect? Like, they are learning, they are fixing things. Things are literally getting better, except when I put on this aspect, all of a sudden my Doombringer was proccing at 100% rate multiple times per second. And it's like, well, that shouldn't. Why is my sword exploding? My minions now do damage over time. Why is my sword exploding? And it just can't be that many things. Like, it literally just has to be less.
Yeah, there's like actually a funny quote that someone wrote in my chat the other day, which was something like, yeah, I believe Diablo 4 is the most bugged game that still kind of works, or something like that. And I really felt that, you know, like that's exactly what Macro is describing, man. Like, you know, you can't, it's not like the game doesn't function, right? You can play it. It's not like Volson that crashes like every 5 minutes, literally, without being hyperbolic. But man, like it is really like in such a rough shape. And I really wonder where that's coming from and why it has not improved over the last year. Like, how are we in season 5 and we still have the same things over and over again every single season, you know, with exactly what Michael described. You put on an item without any other interactions and it just doesn't do what it says. Like, how is that a thing? You know, how does that happen? It's like, there doesn't even have to be anything added to it sometimes, and it still doesn't work. And that really also surprised me, to be honest. And this PTR was, I mean, last PTR we also had many bugs, to be fair. Like, many people forget that season 4 PTR also had
Trev, are they getting static of
and
me
also
talking on
say,
other streams?
are they really gonna fix this and stuff? And I mean, if you have to give Blizzard some credit here, yeah, they did actually fix a lot of stuff from season 4 PTR to season 4 live. And I do expect them to fix a lot of stuff, including balance, including bugs, and so on, from season 5 PTR to season 5 live. But some things will slip through the cracks. You know, some things will be OP.
Thank you.
And it's already bound to happen, right? Like, there's no way around it at this point. So no matter how hard I try, without a second PTR, without a longer PTR, that will happen. And it's just kind
Just
of
came
like,
over from Woody's. I didn't notice it over there.
why does it need to happen like this?
I'm not too sure. Normally people like start screaming at me.
I think one of the biggest problems, which we're kind of alluding to, so Macro's point is exactly at the heart of what I was trying to describe. It's the state that we receive the PTR in. It's the level of no reward, can't even do the mechanic that Woody was describing as well. It's really hurting us. So we can easily point to what the problem has been for the last year, right? Problem is the game didn't release in a great state, and Blizzard has spent a lot of the development in the last year fixing what already exists. We couldn't teleport to Nightmare Dungeons. We didn't have a search function. We had way less stash tabs. The Codex of Power was just fixed. Items were a problem. Armor resistances. So whenever you build something, and then the next thing that you do is you build it again, it's bad, right? And so, like what Woody is alluding to, we keep seeing this, right? Here's the new unique. It does this, but it doesn't do that. Now you have to redo it. Okay, we're diving into hell. It's going to be a cool new rewarding thing. It's going to be the season theme. Can't do it. Has no rewards. Not that fun until you get later on, which most people won't get there. If you're like a consultant talking to Blizzard, the best way to fix your mistakes, I mean, this is kind of obvious, but it's just to not make them in the first place, right? I don't know, like, maybe it's because they've always been playing catch up. Always. They've always had so many bugged things. How do we balance the new things while fixing everything in the past? I'm sure that was not easy to do. And to Blizzard's credit, with the state of the game, how it was earlier, and the state of the game now, in my opinion, they transformed it a lot more than I thought they were going to be able to. So I give them full credit But now that we're sort of kind of in a stable state of the game, we need to put a huge emphasis on the first time we see these things or the first time that they make something, we need a quality assurance process that is a little bit more rigorous and robust than what we've seen in the past.
Yeah, I think this is always going to be the problem with doing the testing out in the open for everyone to see, right? I think it was a very important point. I'm sorry, I don't remember who said this, but I think Woody said this actually. When we had quite a lot of really crucial things not working on season 4 PTR or not in a great state that have actually been fixed in season 4. So I just hope that Blizzard is able to do and pull off the same thing that they were able to do in season 4 when we moved from PTR to the live state. Although I have to fully agree that it's probably not the best thing to showcase something with this amount of failed interactions or on a very low complexity level that that's probably not gonna cut it for quite a lot of people, because I saw it in the chat. Everyone was so not negative, but like heartbroken that season 5 PTR was as it was. But I think this is always going to be something where when you're testing out in the open and people are expecting a bug-free PTR or
Some
like,
feedback,
or
but
at
most
least not
noticeable on
these low-level
Chronix's
bugs, if we
stream.
want to call them that way, that people's
Huh.
expectation are much higher now, especially after season 4, and then we're back to the drawing board just like we were on the season 4 PTR, right? I just hope they just pull off the exact same thing as they did with moving from season 4 PTR to live and fix all of these things, and then we go like, well, they did it again. There we go. Like, that's a great thing. But I might be coping too much. I don't know if like I think the differences are it's a more different type of problem that we have from season 4 PTR to season 5 PTR. But I think there's underlying issues that are very hard to probably fix going into the live service of the season, right? I'm not entirely sure if that's possible of doing it in time. I mean, the hotfix definitely made it so that it's playable. Now we have to see what they can come up with going into the live version of the game. I just hope that people understand this is the PTR. Testing out in the open is always going to, unfortunately, show you everything that is going wrong. It's now up to Blizzard to show us that they are up for fixing these things in the amount of time that they have left, right?
Yeah, I don't think this is like, undoable, right? They have like a month basically to finalize the patch. If they do their jobs for 1 month, they're gonna deliver the season 5 in a big good shape, I think. Everyone here has given a lot of feedback and will continue to give feedback, and
I don't
at
have
some
an answer.
point we're gonna have another campfire and they will talk about it, what they are changing, and then people will give feedback again on that campfire and then do like some last minute tweaks, whatever, right? So yeah, I think if they deploy the resources and they do the jobs and they understand the problems that we discussed, then it will be better. But I think it's like a general problem with, I guess, the entire process of how they are handling PTRs and handling patches. And also, like, for example, it's not just that the newly introduced stuff is bugged, but also the PTR, for example, brought back a lot of old bugs
Hold on a
that were
second.
already fixed for like half a year. And it's like, where did that happen? How? I cannot understand. Like, how do we go back to the season 3 Victimize that just didn't work with like half multipliers in the season 5 PTR when it was totally,
Thank you for the follow.
not totally fine in season 4, but at least it was working in season 4, and now it's just broken again. Like, how does that happen? Like, a lot of people went on the PTR trying to play their favorite build, the Heartseeker Rogue, and they just couldn't play it because Victimizers didn't work. And it's like, why?
That's definitely a rough thing. I have to agree, but I'd rather have it happen on the PTR than on the full season release. I think we can all agree on that one. Although it's probably not the best thing to actually have it happen to begin with. I have to agree here with Rex, and ideally fix the mistake by not making it, right? I guess that's the best approach in that case. We have already talked a little bit about the Infernal Hordes in our first impressions. what are your guys' ideas to improve it and make it fun? And how do you guys think the final version is going to be? What are we going to see for the Infernal Hordes come season 5?
They needed, so it's cool. I really like it. I really like rogue light content. It reminds me a lot of Hades. I wish it was even more like Hades. Because right now it's like isometric Doom, but without the rip and tear, without the cool heavy metal music going on. It's you pick a thing, then demons spawn at super fast rates and you kill them. Either your build can or cannot survive them. Either you do or do not have the mobility to be able to get to the stuff. I think it has a cool puzzle. I really like it. That being said, so getting to the end and opening up 2 chests and getting 2 pieces of legendary gear and then 100,000 gold for my 20 minutes of gameplay was nothing. Now, you know, this content can't just replace all content. It can't just be the new content is always better than all of the old content. It can't just be that vaults are just strictly better than Nightmare Dungeons. It can't just be the only thing that's challenging is the pit. It either needs to have a niche thing that you get a whole bunch of out of doing it, or it has to just be like exactly equal to the other stuff that you do with a bit of dilation for reward based off of time. It can't do what it's currently doing, which is go get 3 items and get some gold and then leave, and have the audacity to have a stash there as if I wouldn't be able to hold all of this stuff in my inventory. The stash being there is super cool. I looked at it and I went, oh my God, I'm going to get so much stuff. And I opened the chest and it gave me 1 item. And I went, what was that? That can't be right. They've been beaten over the head with this. I know it's going to be different. I just wish it had a better first impression, because I kind of did like a tier 5. I kind of just like trounced through it. I did a tier 8. I got my ass handed to me. I went, oh, that's really sick. I got to the end and I fought the bosses and I went, oh, that's really sick. And then the bosses don't drop anything, which is fine because you get the chests. But what if the bosses drop something? Similar to, what if the first time you killed Echo of Loath, it dropped stuff so that everybody didn't hate this fight and get memed on all the time? I think it's like a very similar problem to what we've seen in the past, and I think they could have learned from a few mistakes they've already made.
So Macro was very, very balanced there. Very, he's a good guy. My impression was not quite as smooth as that one. But the one thing I gotta say, Macro, you gotta be careful, man. You can't say stuff like that. You can't say, hey, Blizzard, you have 2 problems. You drop me 3 items and you have a stash, because then they're gonna remove the stash. And we're still just gonna get 3 items. We gotta be careful on that one, because that's gonna be the fix for that. I have never played Hades. I like the idea of these kind of like rogue gameplays. I haven't played Hades. I have it on Steam. I'll play it. It's gonna be fun. Everyone says it's amazing. I have a fundamental problem with the gameplay, at least early on. So with the way that they currently have it set up, after I ran it a few times, not to imply that the chests actually give you anything, the only way you could possibly play it was by taking all of the increased resource things. This gives you 3 more this gives you 1 more Aether, this does that. I didn't need any of the powers to clear all of the early content, so I felt like there really wasn't much of a choice. And because a lot of the things were so, I don't know what the right word is, watered down or simple, it wasn't really changing my gaming experience. I'm standing in the middle of a red room. When the thing pings me on the map, I walk over here, I stand here for 5 seconds, then I'm walking around on my little cardinal directions, and it's over. It changes later on. Most people won't get there, so it has to be way more interesting early on. I think that they need to be much more bold with this event. Like Macro said, it doesn't need to completely invalidate everything else. It doesn't need to just rain all the resources from the sky. But I think the gameplay needs to be top tier for people to want to play it. So one of the first things that I would consider is I would completely eliminate all of the resource bonuses. I would bake them into the actual event. Just on how well you perform in the event is just going to give you way more resources. And I want them to make it way more exciting. I have a huge doc of a million different ideas, but the crazier that you make the event and the crazier you make the choices, my experience in it, doing it over and over and over all day long for season 5 while we're waiting the expansion, will be much more enjoyable. I agree with Macro that the bosses were cool, especially because I didn't do any damage, like a 30-minute fight for me for 3 yellow items. But I do think it's a big miss that the bosses don't drop anything. Yes, you could just bake it into the actual event, and it's all a wash. But it feels good to fight those 3 council members and get something to drop as a reward. So I agree. Macro is kind of like, I could take it or leave it. Here's an idea. I would go the other way. I'd say you need to have the bosses drop something, because you're not making me feel good when I fight them and kill them and I get nothing for it.
Yeah. There's a lot of good points. I actually discussed this earlier as well on my stream and made some feedback that actually goes very much in the direction of what Rax just said. Like, I don't want to have boons that give me just more rewards. I think the rewards being based on how well you do is way better, and all the boons and all the banes should like really alter the gameplay. Like, I want to have something that, like boosts your build, boosts your ability, maybe it makes you proc certain things, makes you unstoppable, but you have like a certain downside or whatever, right? There could be 1,000 ideas that, and you always get 3 choices, right? You can always like choose something that kind of applies to your build or not. There could be insane downsides and insane upsides, and it just like, makes the gameplay more interesting. And I think this is really what the gameplay needs there. Like, it needs to have like some cool effects, some cool upsides, and like every run should feel different. And on top of this, yeah, the boss fight is all right. I guess one downside here is that there is like no time limit. Like, there is like, okay, you have a 1.5 minutes wave timer, and then you can just like fight the boss for like half an hour, and there's like kind of like a mismatch. I guess the punishment is there in the form that you just lose time that you could be spending somewhere else.
Mhm.
But realistically, I feel like the fact that you can just go in with like a really weak build, let's say they make it really rewarding to go to tier 8, right? And you take a really weak build and you kind of like force your way through the entire thing for like an hour. that won't feel good either, right?
That is Chronix.
So I think there needs to be some kind of like punishment or so for just being too slow in clearing up the remaining monsters and doing the boss fight or something, just to like avoid that problem. But yeah, I guess the main thing is like the boons and the banes need like a fundamental rework. There needs to be way more of them. They need to combine into better boons if you have like 3 of the same one, or like they upgrade one into the next or something like that. Let's say there's like a chain lightning proc, and then the chain lightning also transforms into like some extra lightning explosions, and then there's also like a thunderstorm going on in the third one, or whatever, right? So you could do stuff like that is like maybe more reminiscent of something like Vampire Survivors, for example, right? I think this is something that would be interesting to include here, and something that is like, okay, does my build really function with this? Do I have any synergy with this or not? Or there's like many options here. And I think what would also be kind of amazing would be some kind of like endless mode, where there is no wave counter, maybe not even a boss fight, and it's just kind of like an Uber version of the thing, and it just kind of goes on after wave 10. It just keeps going, all the time, basically, without even breaks necessarily. Just let us pick up the boons while it's going or something. And if there was like some Uber mode, and there's like, it's like not beatable, basically. Like, it will fail at some point, kind of like, for example, I compare this to like Echoing Nightmare from Diablo 3. Like, we always like say Diablo 4 is becoming more like Diablo 3, but I think this would actually be like a really useful like comparison, or like inspiration maybe for such a feature, where you will fail at some point because you just get overwhelmed with the amount of monsters spawning in, and there's like this hordes of demons coming at you, and you just have no chance, and no build will be able to overpower this at some point anymore. Make it just like scale up, similar to how the pit scales up, for example, right? Every wave is like +1 pit level or something like that, and eventually that's just like 100 monsters and you can't kill them anymore, and they overwhelm you, and that's it or something. So I think this is really what would make this really fun for like a long-term feature as well. And then the rewards, they could be scaled in a way where it's not like the all-defining thing. It should never be like Macro said, like the one thing that is better than everything else. Maybe it's just like a lack of like something new, like a new type of reward that we could get there, right? Nightmare doesn't have glyphs. Pit has the masterworking. Like we need something maybe specific to that thing that is useful to get, right? Something that, okay, I farm Infernal Hordes for that thing until I'm done with it, and then I go farm the pit until I'm done with masterworking, and then I go farm the Nightmare Dungeons until
There
I
we
have
go.
the glyphs. And this is kind of missing right now, right? They didn't introduce anything new that would actually allow us to put like a niche reward here, but they could still put another niche reward in the future, I guess.
Yeah, I have to fully agree here with the point that we're kind of missing this reward, or like the reason why even to go and do Infernal Hordes in the first place. I think that like it's they very clearly stated
Annie Noob,
that
thank you very much for
you
the
just
prime.
do Infernal Hordes to get all of the other stuff while you're doing that and having fun. And I think that is the main purpose currently of the Infernal Hordes. I really hope in the future there is going to be something that is going to be added and is going to be a reason to go and do the Hordes specifically because you can't get it somewhere else. But I think until then, the idea or the focus and the reward should be fun. And I'm having a problem because to me it seems like it's clearly set up to just be a fun activity that you do while farming all of the other stuff at like a decreased efficiency compared to other activities that you would be doing. So if fun is really the only reward or the only main goal of that system, I don't understand why we are not going crazy. We have this fractured winterglass type craziness in the game already. What keeps us from putting that into a roguelite where or how do they call them, reverse bullet heaven, right? That's like the vampire survivor stuff is called. Like if you look at the level 1 on Vampire Survivors and compare it to like a level 100, you don't even see anything on the screen anymore because there is projectiles everywhere, everything is blowing up. Why are we not going that way when the only reward that we're trying to get from the game mode is supposed to be fun? Why are we not getting double projectiles? You get 100% more AoE radius. Like, go completely crazy. If the reward is fun, I want to see that be the idea of it. And then what I don't understand as well is, why does it cap? Like, I need the pit scaling in there. I don't want to cap. And I want to go completely crazy, and I want to see a billion projectiles, and I want to go on for 2 hours until my character finally gets overwhelmed and I go like, that was fun. Oh, I'm getting 2 million gold, or like 50 million gold for playing 2 hours as well, and I had a lot of fun. Great, let's go. Let's start another one. But with the current iteration, I don't see myself doing that at all. So I'm really curious what they're going to come up with in the future for the Hordes.
The answer is the PlayStation 4. If you're ever wondering the question, and this is not to be like a weird hater. The answer is that Diablo 4 runs on PlayStation 4. If you're ever asking the question of why isn't there more stuff in the game, quite literally, it's physical hardware requirements of an outdated platform. But I don't hate this concept. What if there was a thing in an ARPG that was just meant to be fun, and at the end of it, you got a commiserate amount of global resource so that people aren't complaining that there's no reason to do it? What if it was just fun? Actually, don't hate that concept. The issue being that the player base has very clearly made themselves well known. Nothing can just be fun. It has to be rewarded with items. I don't disagree with that. I'm also playing the ARPG for thousands of hours. I hear you all right? I've done 50 million LK runs just to get a rock to put into a piece of armor in D2. We really can't have it both ways. It has to have a reward tied to it. That reward needs to actually exist for it to be good. And I agree with this concept that like making a decision that says, because if you actually read them, like what are the decisions you're making? One of them was like the event where you stand near the spire takes 50% as many enemies to kill, but you're faster or something. And I was like, I can't even conceptualize what that means as far as how that's going to change my run. And then I clicked it. And I noticed I got less Aether at the end because it didn't say give me more Aether. So, like, I agree. Take the Aether out of it. It's how good you did, even if you don't kill the boss. However good you did is how much of the currency you get. You can spend that currency whenever you want and make it spending the currency worthwhile. And then I think we have a game mode that's cool and like most people won't have complaints about it. But like, again, the boss is just dropping nothing at the end field like complete crap. And like, I couldn't make heads or tails or what was happening. It seemed like if I was standing in particular parts of the arena, less monsters spawned. Like it couldn't spawn monsters if I tucked myself into a corner. So I literally just killed less stuff by what I thought was playing more tactically. So I just had to like stand in the middle and potentially spawn things all around me to get the most monster kills. I just kept running into weird stuff where I was like, it's stopping me from enjoying it in a weird way. And I don't know why it's getting in its own way.
There's another reason, I think, another fundamental reason why I think you have to have items as a reward. So I think Chronix has the main idea here. The most important thing about when Season 5 launches, about whether this will be deemed a success or not, is the event fun? That's the most important thing. Am I having fun doing it? Then the second most important thing is going to be the rewards. But when we think about the rewards, we have to think about most people. And doing this season event is definitely an opportunity cost. It takes some time to clear through these, especially if you pump them up at all. And so a casual player who does not have very much time to play, if they aren't able to build up their character by playing the event, then they will consider it a fail, right? Because they don't have that much time to play. They pay the opportunity cost to go do the season event. And if it's just generic global resources and they don't actually get any gear, they will hate that. They also haven't solved one of the most fundamental problems of I think, character progression. It's not a problem for me. I don't care at all. But Nightmare Dungeons are the only place to get glyph XP, and you must level your glyphs. So they kind of addressed it sort of by buffing the glyph XP, but you pretty much have to do Nightmare Dungeons to level up. And that's fine. They're making them better. The freeing the prisoners is better. They made the events very, very rewarding. You do get higher glyph XP, but if a casual with some knowledge about the game, how are you going to go to the event and not level to Nightmare, not in a level in Nightmare Dungeons if you barely get 1/100 in a season anyway? So I think if you think about it that way, from an opportunity cost with the time that it takes, if the thing doesn't drop a lot of items, if you can't build your character playing the event, I think a huge chunk of the pie of the player base is going to consider it a fail.
Yeah, that's pretty much the feedback that was all of the events. I remember that. What was that? That seasonal event that we had, I think, at the end of season 3, where you were doing this. Was that Lunar New Year or Chinese New Year or something like that, where we had these lunar shrines and everyone went to the reputation board and tried to smash it out as fast as they could, and then they got to the last cache on the reputation board and they opened it and they got a bow as a transmog, right? Like, it's like, I did this for half an hour. First of all, why was it only half an hour? And then, okay, if it's only half an hour, but why did I only get a bow that is only used as a transmog? I think that's pretty harsh feedback, and definitely something that in the current form is definitely true for the Infernal Hordes right now, right? Kind of hard to do. Is there... Yeah, Rex, what would you say?
I was just gonna say they have to buff it. It'll get a massive buff. It'll get a big rework. It's coming. We just have to see what they're gonna do. We'll get a buff for sure. It's not gonna be like that.
So is the idea of giving it another currency in the future something that we would actually agree on would be a good thing? Just like we had masterworking tied to pit, something similar, maybe not as impactful like the masterworking materials, but in the pit, in the hordes this time. I think that's bound to happen, isn't it? In the future.
Tying a new, unique, specific thing to it. Because I've been thinking about this a lot. Remember when D4 launched And one of its calling cards was it wasn't going to have the content bloat of PoE. So if you're somebody who didn't like that about PoE, you wouldn't have to slog through it in Diablo 4. That was one of its selling points. Not whether or not you agree with that, but that was one of the things. So if we add this new content type to it, and we don't tie a unique thing to it, it's not really content bloat. It's something that you can do, but it's not something you have to do to be able to do a specific type of crafting or whatever. It's just an activity that you can do. And as it gets balanced, it just becomes part of the ecosystem of things you can do in case you're bored. Because right now I do Helltide. While I'm doing that, I get my Whispers done. I run off to the world boss before they finally re-added Scattered Prisms to the world. I did some Nightmare Dungeons when I was bored of doing that because I really only get my glyphs to 15. I just don't care about 21 because they've made the Paragon board and additive damage in it completely useless with the addition of tempering. But I kind of felt like I was just always kind of doing different types of activities, and then I go push into the pit when I want to do the endgame. This system needs to not have a unique currency tied to it for me, because I don't want to feel forced to have to go do another thing I don't personally find fun. I don't like running Nightmare Dungeons. I literally run them until I get to glyph level 15. And then anytime you see me clearing a pit, it's without tier 21 glyphs because I cannot be bothered. Because I don't like just running to the boss and killing it and then clicking the button until I level up my glyph. So for me personally, it shouldn't have a unique thing tied to it.
Yeah, I think one solution could be here to not make something new that is like a must-have, let's say similar to Glyph XP, right? Or similar to Masterworking Mats. It could be something that you can only get there, but that is like not an upgrade, basically, right? It's just like, maybe, like a lot of people are always asking for like a temper reset item or something. Like just as an example, not that I really want a temper reset, but this could be, something along those lines. It's not an upgrade to a character. You don't have to go Infernal Hordes to get that thing because you can just get another item somewhere else and that is your item and you don't care about the temper reset, right? But it could be something along those lines, I guess. There could be like a unique reward that, if you have that problem, then you can go and do Infernal Hordes and solve that problem kind of thing, I guess. Why not, right? Or maybe it has like maybe a higher chance to drop specific items that, okay, like outside of the new uniques or something, right? There's like new uniques and new aspects. So if you want those, then of course you go to Infernal Hordes, but okay, do this a few times, then you have it, or you trade for one of the uniques anyway, and then you have a good roll. So who cares, right? But outside of that, I think it would be nice if like every build would have some, like potentially a reason at least to go there at some point, not something that is like mandatory to progress a character like glyphs are, but something that would be nice to have, maybe.
I actually have the answer. I need to jump in very quickly. It just dawned on me. I'm sorry. Has anybody ever played the game Deep Rock Galactic? The dwarf game, Rock and Stone.
I played it for like 20 minutes. It's fun. I like it.
It's in my Steam box of shame.
You bought it and you've never played it. Me too. My friends love this game. They have done something very, very smart. They release cosmetics every new season. And then the next season, they give those cosmetics to everybody. You never miss out on the cool looking cosmetics in that game. People get to buy it early if they want to, but everybody gets it. As such, Deep Rock Galactic is beloved by its player base. Put last season's paid cosmetic track as rewards in Infernal Horde. Still making money for everybody who wants to look like a cool vampire in season 2 of the Vampire. Everybody who wants to look like a cool artificer. And then next season, give people an endgame thing to farm for that isn't power, so that no one realistically can ever complain about Blizzard greedy D4 bad. Like, just put them in there. You can go get the old season's cosmetics in this content. And you get items. You get rewards. You kill the first boss, it drops a 1 GA item. You kill the second boss, it drops a 2 GA item. If you kill the third one, it drops a 3 GA item. Everybody gets stuff. Make it as infinitely hard, but like just have good stuff tied to it. Then we don't need to worry about how to make its currency value equivalent to time spent. Like, have it be completely frivolous if it's going to be fun and challenging, and call it there. And then I'm personally happy.
So I like the idea of giving old cosmetics. That's a good one. To go to the core of the question, should this new mode build in a new currency that you build up? And the honest answer here that I could give is I don't know. And the reason why I would say that is I would never make a decision on this without a tidal wave of additional info. I would need to understand, first of all, kind of going back to what we said about the skills, I'm way less concerned with what they're doing with uniques and legendary powers. I want the team to look at the base skills. I want them to look at the upgrades. I want them to look at, as Woody said, Frozen Orb, nobody plays it till you get a Fractured Winter Glass. That's a problem, a fundamental problem that I want you to look at first before you look at the other things. Whether we add another currency, whether we put in the other cosmetics, whether we, however we do that, I could not possibly answer that question without understanding what exactly is the goal here. We already know we're getting another game mode very soon, raids or whatever those are in the expansion. I would need to understand what are the new. I don't even know if we have the full details on the expansion. There's so many things like, are there new item slots? Were they finally going to give us the paladin? They're like hiding it, but we know it's there. It's coming. There's so many other things that I don't know that I would feel completely uncomfortable saying what we should do here or there. I'll tell you something that I do like though, that I think this strategy works for Path of Exile. It doesn't work for every league, but
farm to
usually
plant.
when the league comes out, all I hear from people is, "Oh my God, Rax, you should have played this one league. It was so broken. It was crazy. People made the craziest stuff." Then they take it back to the drawing board. They dial it down and they insert it into the game, how it makes sense in the core game. I think that flow chart works very well. So that would be a good way to marry all the ideas that we've been discussing. It needs to be very fun, over the top, super rewarding for season 5. Okay, fine. And then have an idea of how do you insert it into the core game going forward, where it's not the fun, exciting season theme and it just has its own niche. I think decisions like this need to be very, very carefully planned to avoid some of the things that we spoke about earlier about redoing everything that you do endlessly.
Yeah, I think that brings the Infernal Hordes to a pretty good close here. Thank you, Rex, for that statement. I do hope we will get a good change here on Infernal Hordes as soon as they go live. Maybe some crazy over-the-top stuff that then gets tuned down and rebalanced as we go into the expansion. That's definitely sounds like a working concept seen in other games, for example. What I also want to highlight during the podcast is also the class balance. Current versus PTR versus our ideal future state. Like, in my opinion, we actually had a pretty good kind of balance going into the PTR, basically going out of season 4, if we so want to call it. And it has been massively shaken up on the PTR. What is your guys' opinion on that topic right now? Maybe Mac, you go first. Or you
I can go first.
Yeah, Rex, please.
If you want me to bail you out, Mac, I can go first.
I would really like to hear about all the other classes first, because I don't need this to become a podcast of me crying like a baby for 40 minutes straight.
Okay, so the first thing that I'll say on this topic is I take like the current balance that I see, and I mostly, when you say balance, I mostly think about it in the end game because they made leveling so easy. I take it with a grain of salt because, like Woody said, and we said it earlier, there's so many bugged interactions, and they're going to change so many things. There's so many things we haven't seen, but I mean, we can make a tier list right now of whatever we think the classes are, but what does that really mean? It doesn't have any relevance to season 5 already going out. So remember, I'm a Barb man. Barb is my favorite class. I'll be honest. A part of me doesn't care at all that Barb raffle stomps everything in the game. That doesn't faze me at all. But Blizzard has explicitly said in one of the recent campfires that what we are doing is we're trying to bring every class up to Barb. That is not how I would have handled it. I would have nerfed the shit. I would have nerfed the shit out of
fucking
Barb.
Ruin him.
I think Barb is just too strong. And we know why. It's the 4 weapons, it's the 4 temperings, it's the more legendary powers. But Barbs, a lot of the reasons why barbs have been too strong is because of bugs and broken mechanics and things not doing what they say that they do and crazy interactions. Over the last year, a lot of those have been fixed, and now we're seeing kind of where the barb is actually landing. I feel like it's 1,000 times harder to buff the 4 classes to Barb's level than to bring Barb down. I think if Barb was somewhere in the stratosphere of the other classes, then our class balance would be better. I think the class balance, like talking about season 4, is better than it has been in the past, where day 1 Barbs with Gore's Grasp or Whirlwinding for 1 trillion damage and just deleting everything. They had to hotfix that, I believe, on the very first day, even though it was reported before. But that's the way that I would approach the entire subject.
Woody, we can't hear you.
Whoops, sorry. I was pressing. I forgot I've pushed the talk here. Okay, so anyway, I definitely agree with that. So I've been actually discussing feedback for all classes earlier, like before the podcast, to prepare and to also send stuff to Blizzard. And I definitely talked about barbs there. And I mean, there's like one crazy outlier, which is what makes Barb so strong right now, which is the Gushing Wounds key passive. Like my chat is already memeing on that because I can't shut up about it. But we have a key passive on the Barb that is like in the range of somewhere of like 2,000 to 5,000% damage bonus for bleed builds. And thanks to aspects and weapon expertise, you can basically convert anything into a bleed build. And this makes it so that Barbs just kind of scale right out of control. There are other builds as well that are not bleed that are also really powerful, like Bash, for example, that can be played non-bleed, that will actually get an 80% nerf in next season because it was just overtuned as hell. Okay, but I guess one big core issue remains, which is that key passive. And now everyone's saying, oh, we want everything else to be buffed to that level of Barbs. No, I think that's not really the right approach. And I'm completely with Rax here. Like, Barbs needs to get nerfed. Like, it's not that I hate Barbs. I love playing Barbs. After my main class Rogue, they are the second most played class of mine. But I actively just enjoy the game less playing a Barb with those insanely broken builds. I think it just makes no sense. It doesn't even fit into the overall picture of the game, where you have Hell Tides, where you can do a build that does like 1 million damage. That's totally fine, and you crush everything. And then you have builds that do literally 1 billion damage, 1,000 times more than that, and they just one-shot torment the bosses. And I don't see the reason to have those kind of builds in the game. And they are mostly currently on Barb, also to some degree on Rogue, that could definitely need some nerfs as well. And if those things are getting addressed, then the whole game would make a lot more sense. Right now, I feel like everyone is always looking at, oh, Barbs has 4 weapons, Barbs go really high in the pit. I don't even believe that the 4 weapons are really the core issue at hand here. It's just that Barbs have the 4 weapons, but they also have insane scaling mechanisms for the late game, like Gushing Wounds or like other key passives, or even like aspects and like legendary Paragonals. All like they have a kind of the same number on everything as other classes on the multipliers, but they have more of those multipliers, right? Like, why are Barb numbers not lower than other class numbers when they have more of them? It doesn't make sense, right? Why do the Barb class-specific aspects have the same numbers as other class-specific aspects? And why do the Barb tempers have the same numbers? Like, nothing of that makes sense when we know that they have 4 weapons. So it's not really the problem that they have 4 weapons. It's just that the numbers on each of the things are like imbalanced, basically. So yeah, there's definitely a huge problem here that the devs just continuously keep ignoring. And then they say we want to buff everything to Barb level. But I don't really see that happening, even if they try, because I don't know, either they don't understand the problem or they just don't want to fix the problem. And I'm not sure which one is worse here. But for some reason, they are trying to buff other stuff, and then they create things that are also ridiculously overpowered, that also one-shot torment bosses on all the classes. And I don't really understand why we need that in the first place, Like, why do we need these builds that do 1 billion damage in the first place on any class?
So, okay, great. Awesome. I figured I was going to be a little bit in the minority because I basically spend half of my stream screaming about the Barbarian. And it's not for all the obvious reasons. We like to pretend it only has like It doesn't have a cool class mechanic like the Necromancer has Book of the Dead. The Barbarian has nothing, except it gets to pick a weapon expertise, and it gets 4 weapons, and it also gets to choose which weapon it uses per attack. So I guess they get to have 3 things, and I only get to have 1 thing, but we get to pretend like it's not existent. But let me ignore complaining about the Barbarian for a hot second. It's the impact that it existing has on the ecosystem of the other characters. Overpower got way too strong. I'm going to put that in air quotes for everybody who isn't Bone Spirit, Necromancer, and the Barbarian. It got way too strong, but it was because the Barbarian could weaponize it in a way that my Necromancer class cannot. I can maybe overpower once every 3 attacks. And because of that, my overpower glyph that said I got 400 additive damage got nerfed. Along with the Barbarian, so much so that I thought it was a bug. I thought they literally just copy and pasted the glyph data over. And I literally told people during the PTR, don't worry, this isn't actually getting nerfed. They would never nerf the Necromancer's power. That doesn't make any sense. And then we get into the live game, and sure enough, my glyph is nerfed. And I went, that's actually insane. Why would that ever happen? Well, Mac, Overpower is too powerful because it allows you to build fully into tank and get damage out of it. Okay, let's look at the maximum life these 2 classes can both get. I can realistically get up to 75,000 life if I have a triple masterworked GA Doombringer, meaning I'm using a Doombringer on the Necromancer, which is hilarious because it does nothing for the character damage-wise. One of the weapons the Barbarian equips is also that same Doombringer. He gets to 400,000 life. He does quintuple my overpower damage and is unkillable. We better nerf overpower. It's too strong. So the Necromancer keeps getting hit. I think that whoever loves the Barbarian this much at Blizzard needs to be held responsible for how negatively impacts the rest of the game's ability to approach balance. If you take out the fact that it always overperforms with these same things in line. I actually don't think that the classes necessarily need to be perfect parity balanced across the board. I think you could have the fast class, and you can have the class that does the best in the pit, and you could have the class that's best at doing whispers or something. I don't know. I think like in Diablo 2 we had that, where like different builds are quite literally just better at doing different stuff. But I think that even interclass balance is in such a rough place for builds that are attempting to do different things and are getting shafted in different ways because of outlier cases of other builds. It just feels like maybe their heuristics are off. The data that they use to make the decisions doesn't match the reality of the gameplay. But unironically, the Blight Necromancer, which is not currently the strongest Necromancer in Season 4, it's like 3rd strongest, is doing 30% of its current damage in Season 5 PTR, even though they said that they capped Wither and they didn't. So you're still getting the full benefit from one of the nerfs that they gave us. It's still doing 30% of its output than it currently is doing. That's what we're looking forward to in Season 5 PTR. And what they did was they buffed the skill to do slightly more damage over time, when in reality it's the Ebon Piercer Amulet which does all of the damage. Like, it's just like the nerfs and the buffs aren't even affecting the things that are causing the problems that make them overperform or underperform. And I don't know how we get there. That part's very much a conundrum to me. And that's why I think balance has been such a hard problem for the game.
Yeah, that's definitely it's kind of funny what they explained with the Blight Amulet there. But another thing that I also want to get at is there's like a very popular build like Whirlwind, Bleed, Tyrius Might kind of stuff that a lot of people are doing that is like really good at farming, for example. And I want to talk about that specifically, which is like also going back to the barbs of Gushing Wounds and so on. And we have a scenario right now where we have like this one really overpowered key passive that has been buffed patch after patch after patch, Gushing Wounds, because it was bugged and not working at all. So Blizzard probably looked at their data and they said, oh, no one is using Gushing Wounds, let's buff it, like give it some extra power. But then, I don't know, they forgot or didn't realize that it just wasn't really functioning the way it should for the longest time. And now they turn it on with like 7 different buffs still in place. And now it just turns out to be completely busted. Yeah, of course it is really busted when they give people like a 5,000% damage multiplier on one single passive, right? The typical key passive is somewhere in the range of like, I don't know, 50%, maybe 100% damage. Like if you look at, I don't know, typical Sorg passes or Rogue passes or something like that, right? So this is kind of like the range here, plus minus. And then you have this, which is like literally 50 times better than the next best key passive in the game, if you will. And not only that, but it also enables like these really weird scenarios where something like Tyr's Might, or even, for example, the new Rakanov unique boots that have this like fire explosion effect and use a cooldown, like those effects can apply bleeds on the Barb, and then you can scale them with the same scaling mechanisms that other classes cannot. Like, for example, the Rakanov boots, that's still hilarious, man. The Rakanov boots, the fire explosion can apply a bleed. It makes no sense, there's no thematic connection there. And it's kind of like, why is that a thing, And then some people are saying that, okay, the same interaction does not work with the two-handed sword expertise, which also applies a bleed based on the direct damage, but Berserk Ripping does. So, ergo, two-handed sword expertise is bugged. But I think it's probably the opposite. That's, you should never be able to apply a bleed from something like a fire explosion in the first place. But even if that was intended, it's like an item like Tyr's Might can never be good for anything that's not a bleed barb. It can never be good for even other barbs. It can never be good for any other class because they don't have the same scaling mechanism that the barbs have. So I think just for the sake of the build diversity and the overall balance of these kind of flat damage item effects, for example, like Tyr's Might, like we could buff Tyr's Might to really good levels that works for everyone if the barb was adjusted. That's basically the point I was trying to make here. The barb just kind of like holds everything at a hostage. That is a flat damage effect that is like in any way scalable for bleeds, and just kind of like destroys these options to exist for other classes. Like no one can realistically make a Tyr's Might build, for example, but bleed barbs because of these scaling mechanisms, because they are so overtuned. And I think that's really a problem here. Like there's like it really kills the creativity it could have with some of those builds, which is really sad.
I want to make a very funny point just to highlight how bad my class is. There is you just spam curses and just trigger Tyrael's Might Necromancer build because it costs no essence and you can just do it at max attack speed, and it can currently outperform Blood Surge Necromancer in the pit depending on where your gear is at. So you can make builds with it. Because comparatively it's better than skills in your skill tree. So don't shit on Tyrael's.
Slowly clear a pit 80, is that what I said?
Yeah. It's that. I've such a great example. So I very recently was looking at the Shadowblight key passive, the red-headed stepchild of the Necromancer, which used to give us a 300 or 3.4 multiplier because of the blighted aspect. They nerfed the blighted aspect, so now it's literally worse than generic multipliers on the same class. And I calculated how much damage it applies on a darkness build, and it represents roughly 0.5% of your total damage output is the procs from Shadowblight after they buffed it. And then I looked at the Ossified Essence key passive that says when I click this button, I double my damage. If I click this button and cast a bone skill, I do minimum double damage. And if I actually build it properly, I actually get like a 2.5 multiplier out of it. Shadowblight says if I click this button, 1% of my total damage output will come from this button and nothing else will happen. How does this exist in the game? It's like never done anything in this game, like other than Infinimist in season 1, but now that they took away the aspect that was the whole reason why you used it, it quite literally doesn't do anything for your build. And I'm not going to recommend clicking the button on several builds unless they change something. I'm not going to have a key passive on my class because none of them do anything for darkness builds. But Gushing Wounds gets a 50 times multi. Actually, how? Like, actually show me the process. Actually show me the process by which we get through these two things. And somebody goes, ship it.
That's definitely a tough problem to solve. I have to fully agree here. For example, it also like translates over to like we've been talking about the bugged stuff earlier on a little bit. It just translates also onto for example, with the minion necromancers, I have to make this example. A Photic is currently bugged that it gives you 100% lucky hit chance for your abhorrent decrepifier, for example. So you basically don't have any cooldowns on your build. And I am having a hard time trying to make a build without it at this point.
I consider it basically being part of the class at this point. Not really the aphotic stuff, because that's probably gonna get fixed, but like my minions triggering the Decrepify. And that has been in the game for such a long time that I consider it baseline at this point. And I'm just having a hard time trying to put this into relation to other classes where you just don't have these problems, where you just you do this and it does what it says most of the time, or even outperforms the stuff. Like Gushing Wounds is a very good example. I don't understand why we have fundamental problems like this on some classes, and some other classes are just bugged out of their mind, working, overperforming like crazy. I cannot understand how these two things can exist in the same game, where we're having core fundamental problems with a skill, and other classes are just completely blasting their every build that they have, which is activating whatever they want, basically. I don't know how we get to that point, actually, of those coexisting.
Yeah, like why don't we have Boiler on this podcast, man? We need like a
Oh, I
Druid
was about to
represent.
say Druid, man.
Can we?
So
The
Boiler,
only
are you
class,
watching?
the only class more just like cracked out of its gourd than the Necromancer is the Druid. Because like, yes, like the poison thing will double dip and you'll get like triple dips on whatever. But then like lightning doesn't do damage for a whole season. You're just like, okay, sorry, man. I don't know what to tell you, Boiler. He's just like alone in a room crying.
so this is
He says
I-
yes. He says yes in my chat right now.
So I'm so glad that we switched to that, because I wanted to say something about druids. One thing that I think is very unfair to them compared to the other classes, and I actually think that this would help. So let's look at our class mechanics, right? So first of all, spirit boons are they're decent, but Blizzard just buffed them, and now they're pretty good. Like I look at the powers that druids get from spirit boons, they're actually pretty nice. I want them badly. But now let's look at the class mechanic quests. Barbs kill like 30 monsters and then a bear, and they're done. Sorcerers
It's a big bear.
walk into a dungeon, pick up a box, do like a 1-minute ritual, and they're done. Necros have to wait till 25. That's kind of lame, but they pick up some bones and then they go into a cellar and they kill something, and they're done. You get the rogues, click 2 things, they do half of a dungeon, and they're done. What do druids do? Druids have to clear a stronghold, then they have to go do 2 quests, and then they have to find 400 spirit offerings, or whatever they're called. I've spent a lot of my time this season just speed leveling the classes, just understanding the nuances of the classes at like low levels. Usually the first thing that I do is I go
it's
do the
Northy.
stronghold, and then I don't get my 400 spirit offerings until I'm like level 60. And druids have suffered so badly in the early game, and Blizzard is trying to find all of these ways to make druids not feel terrible early game. I mean, the thing that carries the druids early game is Poison Creeper. That thing is so good. You lay it down and just murders the whole room. But it's got a cooldown, so I mean, you can wipe a room, whatever it is, once every 12 seconds, whatever it is. And that's all that you have, essentially, no matter what you do. I don't know why they don't really, really ease up on the druid class mechanic, because if you could get your spirit boons earlier, that would help them. It would be significant. So I don't know, like they probably don't want to go away from the theme of like actually picking up the spirit offerings and giving them to the birds or whatever the hell druids do is. But the part that really gets me is, on top of doing all of that, you have to pick up 400 items. I think that is so unbelievably dog shit, and I think that they should nerf that again to make the druid leveling experience a little bit better.
Man, you're very passionate about this.
I
too, man.
hate this, man. I hate it.
I'm
It's
just
so
sitting here and,
garbage.
like we're talking about like in-game build and balance and meta, and then Rax comes in with like the spirit boon rage, and I'm like, whoa, I'm fucking flashed right now. Like, I did not expect that to be a problem.
Wow.
Like,
How do we help druids leveling? Oh, I wonder. How do we help them leveling? Maybe we don't give them a 6-hour class mechanic.
okay.
I do kill 15 monsters and then go down the street after going to a waypoint that was easy to get, and then kill 15 other monsters. The hardest part about the Necromancer class mechanic is figuring out you have to put the golem on your skill bar. and how to do that. Unironically, that one's a big skill test. No, but I mean,
all
like,
of them are like that, except Druid, man. All of them are like that.
I did level a druid. I started picking up those spirit things. I was just like, chat, what the hell are these? Like, oh, you need like 500 of those things. I was like, okay. And I got to 500 and people look at me like, why didn't you go cash in any of your boons? And I'm like, I don't even know what cash in means in this context. Like, oh, you go spend them to unlock stuff. It's progressive. And I was like, well, why would I ever go there multiple times? I'm just going to get all 500 of them. And then like 4 hours later, I was like, I guess I'll go get my class mechanic. I am level 75. I got there before I went. I guess I'll go do this because I didn't even know I could or what I needed to accomplish. I just kept waiting for the menu to open. I was like, damn, this is a long class mechanic. All right, sure.
I don't know. I mean, okay, we can argue that okay, leveling has become so fast these days that spending these 10 minutes to do the class quest is actually somewhat noticeable. But I don't know. Does it really matter if the Druid class quest is a little bit longer? I guess you can shortcut it. I think this is such a minor problem to discuss. If you ask me, man, I don't know.
Sounds like a rogue. I don't know what to tell you, boys. Sounds like a man over there who likes to go
I mean,
fast.
I mean, they buffed the spirit boons, man. They're pretty. I think
did.
one of them is 10% chance to crit. Getting that 20 levels earlier when you don't have anything is pretty good, actually. Like,
Yeah,
for,
I agree.
for-
The spirit boons are nice. They actually buffed one of them in to give you like movement speed now. Like a lot of people are always complaining, oh, druids are so slow and stuff, and now they get extra movement speed. So that is kind of nice as well for like the leveling experience, I guess. In general, like druids have really leveled up a lot during season 4, I think, with and also like looking into season 5, they have broken the shepherds aspect meta with the triple companions on every build and these kind of things. I really like where druids are headed. Like if you're talking a bit more about like the actual meta, let's say, in the end game, I think they're looking relatively solid in the future. We have at least 2 very good builds, Landslide and Companion, and that's despite Companion literally not working with a single of its skill tags that says Werewolf or Storm or Nature Magic, which is kind of hilarious. Despite all of that, it's still a good build. And they have a bunch of decent builds. Like, there's Avincia, there's Pulf, there's Lightning Storm. Tornado is kind of lacking a little bit, I guess. But yeah, in general, I think there could be like maybe more buffs to the class. And especially like some of the non-landslide, non-companion builds. But originally we talked about the druids, about the bugs. And I think druids have really the worst of the bugs with like what I just explained with the companions and the tags not working. And it seems to be not just be isolated to companions. It seems to be like a common theme across the entire class. They have so many like, okay, transform this skill into that skill. You now do this while doing that, and these kind of effects. And all of like half of them, at least, are just not working correctly. And it's like, okay, you have like this like 5-head build in mind. The entire druid class is all about mixing and matching and doing like transformation and whatever. But then half of it doesn't work, and you need to know like these 1,000 exceptions of what is actually functioning correctly and what is not, and you have to look it up. And I think that is really a major problem here. And if stuff was actually working the way that it says, going back to our original discussion about new uniques, then this would work much better for the druids as well. And then people probably wouldn't really have to complain so much about being weak or anything like that. I don't think that druids even are necessarily weak these days. They are in an okay spot. But it's like, why do so many things not work correctly even after all this time? And that's kind of sad to see.
I think the most important thing that we haven't touched on is the fact that you can't see your transmogs unless you're in a loading screen. And I actually think that is criminal. The fact that Druid has transmogs and the only way to see them is to not play a werewolf or a werebear. That sounds like a joke, but like unironically, I don't know how they expect Druid players to like quite literally ever spend money on this game when you only see it during loading screens, and then you're a werewolf and you don't. You could be wearing the literal body of Diablo, and then you turn to a werewolf, and I guess you're not anymore. And that seems like a wild oversight from my side.
That's a very easy fix. You sell bear and werewolf MTX. It's
I think they've got a spot for you, Chronix. With ideas like that, you're going straight to the top. How to buff the shop.
I mean, it's like just give him a panda skin. Boom, there you go. Best selling MTX in D4.
It unironically would be.
You just got Employee of the Month, and you're not even there yet.
Yeah, like on the topic of Druid here, it's, to be honest,
I played it a bit in PTR because it's my least played class, and I needed to like get more into it. And what's kind of crazy, I mean, maybe that's because I'm coming from necromancers and kind of like a little bit also rogues, but the builds are fun. Like I'm having fun. It's crazy. I'm pressing trample and the whole screen lights up. The sound effects are cool. This thing triggers that thing, and that triggers another thing, and that resets the cooldown, and then you can trample again. And I don't know. I think in the fun department, Druid seems to be in a very good spot. Now we just have to make we have to give them the gushing wounds treatment probably to some of the things, while also fixing underlying bug problems.
I'm getting triggered now.
Uh-oh. Do we need a Woody gushing wounds Twitch emote now?
No, but it's like we discussed this earlier, right? And I think almost everyone just said that okay, barbs are just like overtuned, and like it doesn't really make sense for like how the game is balanced for any build to be on that level of like some of the barb builds or even some of the rogue builds. I think, right, where like we just like season 4, like think about this. Season 4 was the season that introduced tormented bosses in order to solve the problem of us one-shotting Duriel all day long. And what we do now, we one-shot tormented Duriel all day long. Wonderful, like why is that a thing? Why did it happen? And this is the same season that they introduced those bosses to solve the problem, right? Like, I don't get it, So all these like cries about, oh man, don't nerf it or something. Like, tormented bosses, they are supposed to be, a fight, a bit of a challenge, something that like is rewarding for like you get more out of it than you put the mats in and all these kind of things, right? And it's like supposed to be a bit more end game thing, and you get like something special out of it, but it's like also not required, right? It's like completely optional to do the tormented boss. You can do the normal boss. There is barely a downside to doing the normal boss either. So why do we want builds that one-shot tormented bosses? And it's like the same thing if like asking for buffs for certain builds or certain classes, or in asking barbs to not get nerfed. It's like a general problem of like how the game is balanced in general.
Like when it was me, you, Chronix, and Northy going in to fight the tormented Grigor for the first time, and we kind of just like got our asses handed to us for a bunch, and like we went and changed the elixirs that we were drinking, and like I think I like added hemorrhage to my build just to make blood orbs to be able to heal for long enough. Some of the most fun I've had playing the game. Now I hear the argument of not everybody has as much time to play as you. People just want to be able to blast. I totally hear that. I really, really do. I super do. I understand that. I think that's what Helltide is for. Like they gave you a perfect thing for you to do on a low power build that is incredibly rewarding, and you get to enjoy smashing through infinite monsters. Some of the content has to be able to be challenging and rewarding to do for that purpose. Else we're grinding for nothing. So I fully agree that like one, just like power just needs to come down. That was also one of the selling points of Diablo 4 was that power wasn't going to get to D3 levels. This is like the whole thing too. This was a season where they were supposed to give us the un-one-tappable bosses and tormented bosses, but they also added tempering to the game, which puts 1,000 additive damage onto your gear alone and makes you cast twice as many projectiles 70% of the time. It was never going to succeed at reducing the power scale. They quintupled the value of gear and made it so strong that it has invalidated the Paragon system as a meaningful thing to invest into other than getting glyphs, and will like continue to negatively impact their ability to give us power in other ways. That has confused me for a long time. I actually don't understand why tempering is as powerful as it is when masterworking is supposed to be like the end game true power scale. But at level 20, I can go add 200 additive damage to my weapon and my projectile will cast 50% double. Like that's an insane amount of power that we added onto items. And I don't know how they walk that back in a meaningful way.
Yeah, I agree. I think tempering is overtuned pretty much across the entire game. But I want to go back to one of the things that you're asking for. I agree with you that at some point, like for me, when you're posed with a challenge and you work toward it and you overcome it, that's like the most meaningful and fun time you're going to have, or at least for me, in the game, like you were describing. But I don't think that that's coming in Diablo 4. I don't think that's in Diablo 4's future. And the reason why I say that is because that's what Blizzard said essentially in the interviews that we had leading up to season 4. One of the questions that I asked Joe and Adam was, do you guys have plans? So one of the comments that they made, I believe it was to one of the questions that Riker asked, is they said, ARPGs are about getting loot, getting more powerful, killing more monsters, getting more loot, and then that loot needs to have a meaningful power progression where you beat the boss. That's the main way we want you to beat the boss is gathering gear and then overcoming it. Okay, so then I went next and I said, okay, let me ask a follow-up here. Do you guys plan to design encounters where gear alone will not save you? You have to exude some kind of skill, you have to overcome certain mechanics, and there is no way to just purely outgear it. And while they didn't say no, I don't remember their exact answer. Their answer wasn't yes. And they were like, oh, maybe, yeah, but the main way we want you to get power is from gear. So I got to be honest with you, man. Like I've been kind of coming to terms with it. I don't think that for their target audience or for their current design of the game, unless they want to change their mind, that they're going to build a lot of encounters like that. Maybe we'll get like the bare minimum that you and Woody are talking about, where we won't just be one-shotting the tormented bosses. But I don't ever think like with a very well-built build that they're planning on making it take any kind of real skill to beat it, from what they said.
I was really hoping we can tormented bosses is going to be exactly that. And I was really hyped going into it, and they were exactly what I wanted. I mean, sure, okay, I would have taken double the HP as well, but I mean, I was totally happy with how it was looking like. And I was finally in a spot where I was like, wait, great, there we go. I have something that I can tackle and try to not only make my build according to the fight, but also become a better player to help my build overcome the challenge. And I was really hoping that this is the direction we're going to go, or at least that is the reason why we have the tormented bosses, just to kind of like grab the point that Woody made for those. And then literally just have them in the game as something optional that you don't need to do. You just do them for your ego or to test your build or something like that. Unfortunately, with giving them a little bit of an efficiency boost with the 3 times materials and 5 times the loot, maybe wasn't the correct play after all. But like I'm completely fine with all of this so far. The only thing that drags me down completely is the season you introduce the pinnacle boss, or the hardest content in the game, so to say, and make something that is really, really hard. You also decrease the HP by 30% in that same season. So that just goes to show me that it was way too hard for the general player base. And I think Rags is like 100% spot on, not only with the sayings that we have gotten from the interviews, but also, I mean, you see it in their actions, right? They are in a great spot, as we probably can agree on, and then they nerf it by 30%, and now everybody is back to one-shotting it. I'm just a little bit doom and gloom here when I think of raids, because I thought about tormented bosses, what I'm now thinking of raids. Maybe that is going to be the thing that's going to give me that satisfaction of something being super hard to overcome. And I just hope that that is going to be something that, yeah, it's not going to get nerfed by 30%. It's in their HP on the season. They're going to introduce it.
One thing that I want to chime in with here is, since you mentioned raids right now, right? And there's going to be like this co-op mega dungeon or whatever
exactly
in the expansion. Yes, exactly. So that's what you're talking about. And this is supposedly going to be something that we expect to be somewhat challenging or not. It doesn't really matter. But the thing is that we have all of the normal versions of all of the bosses that drop exactly the same loot as the tormented bosses, right? There's just like a slight efficiency gap here. And we look at, for example, WoW, where we actually do have raids, and those raids have 3 separate difficulties, right? There's like normal, the heroic, and then there's the mythic raid. And the mythic is where all the tryhards are, and then, heroics are like the more engaged players, and then normal, and there's even 4 difficulties. There's LFR as well, right? Where like the casuals go. So everyone gets to experience that stuff. Everyone can go and fight normal Duriel, and everyone can go and fight normal Andariel on whatever, and get the loot and whatever they need. But why don't we have the hard mode, the tormented version, that is actually like a fight, right? Like for the mythic raiders, basically, right? And I kind of fear that we go into this expansion and we're gonna have this new system, and it's gonna be something inspired by WoW, let's say, right? But it's gonna be so trivial, and it doesn't have to be, right? Maybe they're only gonna have one difficulty, and that difficulty is supposed to be done by everyone, and so we're all just gonna blast through it because they're playing a different game than more casual players. And there's nothing for players like us that are just blasters. So why is it that way, right? Why can't we have a hard mode for these kind of things and an easy mode? Like we literally have that for the bosses, but the hard mode is also an easy mode, pretty much, right? Like it's like, okay, it's like maybe not as trivial for other people than it is for us, but compared to, for example, the gap between like a normal raid in WoW and the mythic raid in WoW, if you compare like a normal boss and a tormented boss, the gap is not nearly as large in Diablo than it is in WoW, and I don't understand why.
I do want to I want to give some credit here, because we've all generally like ignored the concept of the pit. So to give some context, as a class that's currently capping out at like 142 in solo pit tiers on the Necromancer, we do have content that is literally the number you can get to is directly related to how much you try hard. My issue is in that not existing for the rest of the content as an option. But like, I don't know. I have a lot of mixed feelings about the pit. I really like the pit. The Necromancer class right now does have to dodge every boss mechanic at our highest pit tier. Like we can't survive boss mechanics, like the shadow boss mechanics. So I can't just like stand there and have full uptime on DPS. It does feel like a bit of a skill check. It is definitely a gear check. I guess the only issue is that there is the highest point that all builds reach. Like quite literally this build, even played, if you were to play it by a perfect AI, physically cannot do a higher pit because the damage output is not possible to get beyond this boss's maximum life right here. But I don't like that being sequestered to this one content type, where eventually the reward that it gives you is of no value because you have quite literally made a perfect piece of gear. Do we feel like the pit is not delivering this experience in any way? Because I made a very offhand comment that if you want to be casual and blast stuff, the Helltide exists. I think it's just as valid to say if you want to be try hard and blast, there's the pit. Do we think it's currently succeeding in offering that experience? Because I do want to give credit. I think it's a fairly good thing. It just kind of has a weird terminus where it's like you literally can't go higher and there's no reason to do it anymore. Just most people won't reach that.
So I'm not super happy with the pit, and I'll tell you why. So people ask me all the time, Rax, you really spending no time in the pit, and you spent 4.5 years pushing Diablo 3 Greater Rifts. They're like the same thing. They're not the same thing in my mind. They're not the same at all. One of the things, one of the most basic things is Diablo 3 has a competitive leaderboard, and really the only thing that stopped it from being super competitive was all the cheating. Everyone's botting and using Turbo HUD, and 99% of the time, whoever wins is just an illegitimate player. Another thing about Diablo 3 is, yes, you do need good gear, certainly, to go play Greater Rifts and compete on the leaderboard. But a lot of it was knowledge and strategy and planning. For example, most players, when they open a map, they can't even tell what map it is. And there is a massive variance in how good the maps are. There's a massive variance in how the monster types, not only their values, but how they fight, how you move them. And there's also a ton of mechanics on how you specifically move through them and where the elites spawn, what affixes they have, and then how you are going to spawn the pylons. How you can manipulate how the pylons spawn. And doing these manipulations it results in a much, much higher tier level. So if we gave Woody a whirlwind barb and you gave 1,000 other players a whirlwind barb, and even if you let them practice with the build, even if you tell them what to do, Woody is going to absolutely annihilate them because he just knows so much more about the game. It's going to be 10 tiers higher than almost every player. Everything that I just described does not exist in the pit. The only thing that matters is dodging the boss mechanics. Every pit clear is essentially the same thing. It's 3 elites and then a little bit of trash, and 3 elites and a little bit of trash. It's a pylon of 3 elites. You walk through, you kill an elite, three elites, trash the boss. There's a little bit of variance on which boss sucks more, but I'm completely missing the competitive aspect from the leaderboard, and I'm completely missing 98% of the skill required to actually be at the top. If you just pick a really easy build to play like Thorns Barb or Bash Barb, and you swipe your credit card for 100 billion gold and just endlessly re-roll your triple greater affix thing and finally hit your tempering, you will beat 99% of barbs even if you're a worse player. This is impossible in Diablo 3. You will not be able to beat someone who actually knows the stuff. So this question is, so a lot of people will hear that answer and say, Rax, everything that I'm hearing you saying actually makes Diablo 3 suck. The variance in the maps, the variance in the mob types, this or that, all that shit. I don't want to do that. But remember what the question was. We're talking about, does this high-end thing satisfy or satiate the hunger for the people that like that stuff? The answer is no, not at all to me.
I do have to agree with that, actually. So what Rex described really puts it on point. Like the strategy is really lacking when it comes to pit runs. Like you can't pull monsters together. You can't, like prepare the boss fight with a pylon or whatever. To some degree, that is good. The RNG is lower. Like, we had fishing in Diablo 3. That was also kind of annoying and so on, but it was like kind of part of how leaderboards just work, I guess. And even if we, like, for example, we are doing like pit ladder round 2 later this season, and there is RNG, and like you have to get the right monsters, the right run, the right boss, and whatever. So the RNG is still there to some degree, I guess, maybe less than Diablo 3. But yeah, the fact that there's like it's just a kind of a dumbed down version of pushing has also kind of led me to not push as much as I would normally do in, like, for example, Diablo 3. Diablo 3, I would push every build I do for like hours and hours and dozens of hours, sometimes hundreds of hours in some cases, just to try to get like in that insane run and have like a really nice placement on the leaderboard. And I don't really feel like I want to do that much in Diablo 4. So yeah, there's definitely a concern, I think, with the pit there.
That is that. Sorry,
Go ahead.
That's some insight that I think is very helpful. So I have done 5 GRs in my life. like to be 100%, I've maybe played like the first 4 days of like 2 seasons of Diablo 3. And all I ever hear is that the fishing sucks the absolute moon out of the sky. I do assume that that's just something that is only for literally people trying to get the #1 spot on the leaderboard, though. Like, how much does the casual player fish in Greater Rifts?
They don't even know what it is or how to do it. 0.
Yeah, I mean, maybe at the end of the season for a little bit to try to make the number bigger, but then it's like a percentage-wise, it's just nothing of their game time, right? Compared to a rank 1 player who does it for 2 days in a row.
Right. So how valuable would it be to add in this? Well, first off, we just need leaderboards, right? I think, like, bare minimum, what if we had a leaderboard? What if Maxroll didn't have to make the leaderboard? Like, what if it was in the game? Like, how crazy would that be? How much of it does it alleviate just to literally be able to show your chops? Like, I did it. Like, I'm currently here with this build.
I mean, go ahead, sorry.
Thank you, Rex. I gotta be honest. At this point, even a leaderboard for me doesn't really cut it anymore, because I'm missing these points that Rex was highlighting. I can go there and try to get the rank 1 spot, but I'll maybe do it once at the beginning of the season, and then I'm just done for it. But there is no mastery. There is no honing your craft of doing it. You just go. and either you get Spirit Caller or you don't get Spirit Caller. There is nothing like, oh, I played this pylon wrong. Oh, I did this pull wrong. Oh, I could have gotten this elite pack in there as well. You know, like those things are non-existent. It's like you blow through the trash mobs, you go to the boss. Which boss is it? Oh no, I'm out. Do it again. You know, there's no mastery that you're improving. There's no real improvement there that makes you a better player, in my opinion, at the current moment for the pit.
I completely agree with what Chronix said. The leaderboard, I think it needs to be in the game. So then let's ask ourselves a philosophical question. You're rank 1 in the pit on the leaderboard. What does that mean? Well, to me, the first thing that I like, if I had a blindfold, someone gets a pit 157, and I go, chat, ready for this? We're gonna inspect this guy. It's gonna be a quad uber unique triple greater affix 12 of 12 master working character. Oh, yep, there it is. And then, but then you take it one step further. Okay, so they have like they RMT'd everything or whatever. But then you ask yourself, okay, so whatever, they have the most godly gear ever. What skill did they exude with that gear? They walked forward until they got the boss that they wanted. And then there is a little bit of dodging there, but you didn't actually do anything. It's not something that you can post on your fridge. You can't be proud. I mean, I don't want to completely downplay it and say that you can't be proud of it. Let me speak for me personally. I would not be proud of it. Like what did I do? Like here would be my underlying feedback to Blizzard. We're not gonna change. It's like a giant ship, right? We're not gonna steer the course to something completely different. And I 1000% agree with them that in general, most of their decisions should be made for the general public to get their game out there for everybody to love it. 99% of their decisions are for that. What I would say is, remember, there is a core, there is a small portion, a core portion of your audience that does really take pride in playing Diablo and wants to make really good characters and then wants to be challenged and have that awesome feeling of overcoming something super difficult that you have made. That is what I'm looking for. The pit doesn't solve it for me. The leaderboard doesn't solve it for me, because what does it mean? It's different. When you get a rank 1 clear in Diablo 3 really far into the season, it is very hard to do. Not only do the circumstances have to be right, but you have to play it well. I can't even explain to you how the wrong step here or there, one little mistake, can throw away an otherwise perfect run. So you really feel great when you accomplish it. And I'm also not saying Diablo 3 is perfect. Diablo 3 had a ton of problems. Fishing was horrible. I endlessly complained about it. But I think we're seeing the exact opposite here, where nothing really matters except maybe the final boss. And it has, for me, currently completely disengaged me from it.
Yeah, I gotta say it's bold of you to assume that you are able to inspect the top bar from leaderboard when he doesn't have no profile.
Macro and I have each made a mistake this podcast.
Yeah, but to be real, I mean, yeah, I definitely agree, and that there could be something done here, I guess, to make it interesting for like the pushers. But I think also maybe there could be like other avenues to explore for like competitive modes, right? If you're talking about competitiveness in general, like, you know, we don't have to redesign the pit completely to become like the competitive thing for the entire game or something. Like, for example, Greater Bits or the leaderboards was. It would be nice to have leaderboards, you know, no matter what. I'm not saying we shouldn't get them. You know, we are literally making our own leaderboards right now, right, on Maxwell and stuff. But, you know, it would be nice to have that, but maybe there could also be other more interesting competitive modes, right? Some people that really want to grind out the perfect gear and, you know, push the pit. I mean, sure, let them do it, right?